Hello everyone, welcome to Analog IAS Current Affair Analysis for 5th October 2020, and these are the articles we'll be dealing today. This article for the day is taken from The Hindu and it is titled Transforming Businesses and the Insolvency System. Now, what is the purpose of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code that came out in 2016? Let me explain briefly. So, one of the most important resources in an economy to drive an economy is financial resources, that is, capital. Now, whenever a company is raising capital, it approaches financial institutions like, say, for example, a bank. Now, in the simplest scenario, let us take for an example a company requires 1 lakh rupees for starting a company, and it approaches the bank and says that I'll return this money after a particular period as decided by the contract at 10% per annum interest. Now, it is the duty of the company to pay back that money. But what if it fails? So, what happens to the loan given to the company? It turns into a dead asset or a non performing asset. But again, the banks cannot afford to lose the entire money, so they will try to extract as much as money from the company as possible. So, for this, they will need to have a certain mechanism. Now, previously, there were a lot of legal routes to extract this money. For example, there were SARFAESI acts, there were debt recovery tribunals, but they did not recover enough money and succeeded in its objective. So, in economy, we have to understand a simple concept called creative destruction. Now, what is this creative destruction? So, for example, in 1990s, floppy disk was used to store data. It hardly stored around 2 MB of data. But in the present day, we have hundreds and thousands of GB worth data being stored in a small pen drive. Now, had there been no invention and the market for floppies being destroyed, we could not have had this 1 TB hard drives and big servers actually coming at a very affordable cost. So, unless and until we destroy obsolete innovations like floppy disks, we cannot make room for new inventions like the hard disk. So, it is in this context we have to understand that our financial resources are very limited. So, a company that has invested in floppy disks should also see a possibility to exit this and invest in a hard disk company. So, this is the basic logic with which banking or any financial institution works. In 2016 economic survey, there was a problem that was quoted by the chief economic advisor, and it was called the problem of exit. Now, what is this problem of exit? Companies that tried to invest money into these companies were not able to get out and invest in these companies because of the market failure and the inability of various banking institutions or financial institutions to recover this money. So, to address this problem of exit, the government has proposed the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016, and it has been more or less successful in reducing the time of litigation, but it still has certain problem. For example, initially it was envisioned that it would address the problems in 270 days or something within that, but a few companies which have come under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code were not in a position to ensure that the process completed within the 270 days, and they moved the Supreme Court for further extension. Recently, since a lot of companies were facing the heat of the pandemic, the government has decided to stop the implementation of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code for a brief period. It is despite this temporary halt in the insolvency proceedings, we can say that Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, despite all its shortcomings, has been much more successful than every other insolvency laws of our past era. So, it is in this context, after appreciating the positives, we have to look into the areas that were important for development. So, the first important issue that we have to take into consideration is the judicial pendency. Now, when we're talking about the World Bank's ease of doing business report, contract enforcement has been one of the contentious point where we did not perform contract enforcement is closely linked to this issue of judiciary. Now, when we have as many as 4 crore pending cases in our judiciary, it is quite obvious that we are performing very badly with respect to contract enforcement. Now, this enforceability of contracts has been a challenge because on an average it takes as many as 1445 days for a contract to be enforced, and that too at a cost of nearly 31% of the claim value. This is simply unacceptable. If 30% of the claim value goes into judicial pronouncements and judicial processes, how else will the company survive? That is simply not acceptable, and the cost and time of this contract enforcement should significantly come down. Now, second thing is criminal penalties. We have to take into consideration certain good faith practices and bad faith practices. So there are certain companies which willfully take loans and then default. So this is an example of bad faith practice, and there are certain companies which come up with all honest intentions but fail to take off. This is because of the market failure. So we have to just penalize those companies which are committing mistakes in good faith and criminalize those committing mistakes in bad faith. That is the second reform that is needed. The next set of reforms it is closely linked to the first point that we have spoken. Since we have judicial pendency, the government decided that we have to have more commercial courts. So in 2015 it has passed an act in this effect. But the rollout of this commercial courts, commercial divisions and commercial appellate divisions as per the 2015 act have been so slow. And it is in this context the author is suggesting that we have to allow district courts to function as the commercial courts and move out the obsolete 1500 laws which were related to insolvency. So all this should be removed. Together with IBC, these highlight a major and multi-dimensional effort by the government to provide comfort for contract enforcement. The next thing is the significant role of the regulator, that is Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India. So it regulates all the issues that are related to the insolvency policy. So all the policy level matters are taken care by this body. At this juncture, we have to understand that whenever a company comes for insolvency petition, there are two possible outcomes. One is resolution. That is, the committee of creditors or all the group of people who gave money to this company will decide on what will be the alternative plan to ensure that they get back their full money. That is also in the best interest of the company as well as the lenders who gave money. And the second one is, when they are not able to come to a conclusion, they will go for liquidation. The problem with liquidation is, say for example, a company is worth 100 crore rupees because of the business potential it has. Now when you take out that business potential, the assets of that company, like say for example the buildings it has, the workforce it has, or whatever tangible assets the company possesses, that will be liquidated and sold in scrap. Say if it is worth 30 crores, they will be losing around 70 crores worth of money. So this is not an ideal situation, but it is simply better than nothing at all. So that is the last resort measure that will be in the interest of every person involved in this entire process. Now what leads to resolution and what leads to liquidation is keenly determined by the time process. So if the process takes more time, it will move towards liquidation because they are not able to come to a resolution, and the company will also be not in a position to revive their business. So the best interest would be to move towards a time bound procedure. That is the gist of this article. So what the author suggests as a concluding remark is that we have to focus on MSME sector and encourage our entrepreneurs by ensuring that they have larger access to the capital. That will create a multiplier effect in our economy, because it is the MSME sector that will eventually provide more and more number of jobs in tier 2 towns as well as rural areas. Therefore it is important to encourage this sector. That is the gist of this article. This article is taken in the context of the new education policy that was announced earlier this year. So this new education policy came after a gap of 34 years to address the problems of the educational system. And within this, one of the most important and emotive issue is the issue of the language. So what does this policy talk about with respect to the language issue? And what are the constitutional provisions? Let us have a look into this article. Now let us go back to the original national policy on education that came out in 1968. If we take a look at the 1968 report, there was a three language formula based on Kothari Commission. So Kothari Commission has said that there shall be a first language, second language and a third language. The first language will be the mother tongue or the regional language, and the second language in Hindi speaking states, it will be other modern Indian languages or English. Whereas in non-Hindi speaking states, it will be Hindi or English. When it comes to the third language, in Hindi speaking states, it will be English or a modern Indian language. In non-Hindi speaking states, it will be English or a modern language. So what are the new changes brought in the new educational policy that came out in 2020, that is earlier this year? So before going into that, we have to understand the purpose of this language policy. Firstly, it is to encourage multilingualism and to promote national unity in a country which has so many different languages. Language is a very emotional issue and it is very close and integral to our culture. Therefore, undermining one culture or one language and imposing another culture or another kind of language on different people will be against the idea of unity and diversity. That is the reason new educational policy has decided to retain this three language policy, albeit in a different form. Let us have a look. In the new education policy, the policy raises the importance of mother tongue and regional languages, and the medium of instruction is, it is recommended that until class 5 it should happen only in mother tongue. Now the writer of this article has a problem with this provision because it ignores English. His explanation is that we treat English as a foreign language and not a native language. But if we take a close look at English, it is the only common unifying factor amongst a lot of people who cannot speak a common language like Hindi. So Hindi is as alien to a South Indian as English is, and it is very likely that educated sections of South India will be in a much better position to speak English than Hindi. Instead of promoting English as a colonial language, it is important to understand the importance of this language in our day-to-day administration. Even if we don't accept this, it is a fact that English has remained as the lingua franca of many educational institutions and also administrative functions. So the common point between a lot of administrative bodies in north and south has been English. The common point has always been English when it comes to judiciary also. So we should not try to promote English as something that is cosmopolitan. We have to understand the fact that it is widely spoken now, and it is the common point of communication between various parts of the country which speak different languages. So for all these practical purposes, we should not discourage the English adaptation at junior level and at the early levels of schooling only. Again, even in the global level, we have to understand that English is one of the most widely spoken language. Now because of this fact that it is so widely spoken, knowing this language will give you a better pay. Now India did not create an economy like say Japan or China, which has a completely indigenous set of technology to promote a single language. Now we cannot say that we have to impose Hindi on everyone and expect them to have high jobs because they are not in a position to speak English, and most of the job providers are multinational companies coming into India with a hope that they will find cheap labor and skilled labor. So it is in this practical point of view we have to encourage English language as well. Another important point that we have to remember here is English as a legal language. Now whenever we are talking about legal language, India has adopted a lot of international law principles based on English language only. So the legislations derived out of these international law principles use the same kind of language in the text of our legislations. So it will be lost in translation if we don't understand the significance of those particular terms. So keeping all these practical points of view, we have to encourage the language of English. That is the gist of this article.